So, right, we'll make a start. Thank you everybody for coming along and dragging yourselves out on a rather miserable Friday night. It was always hard to know if Friday's going to be popular or not. Certainly with swimming as well, it kind of sometimes it's really busy, next time it's a bit quieter. But hopefully with this we've got some good things in here that we can even discuss as well. Sometimes with a smaller group it's better, we get a little bit more questions, we get a little bit more engagement. Yeah, hopefully by the end of it there's some good tips and knowledge I can hopefully impart to give you some things to work on. So first of all, I think the key thing with swimming is trying to keep it simple. It's not simple, it's quite complex, there's a lot of technical parts of swimming, it's usually why people struggle with it. Unfortunately, if you're coming here to get some secret tips or secrets, there really isn't any. There's maybe some things that I can hopefully tell you that I've learned, but there's no magic to swimming in reality. There's a lot of it's just trial and error and time in the water. Things might improve quickly for some people, and unfortunately for other people it takes a long time. There's a few reasons why. Sometimes it's just unfortunate you can't get the right thing to work, so don't always be trying to do it quickly. I always say to swimming, and said this to anybody who was at the talk on Monday, learn to enjoy the process of swimming, learn to be in the pool and enjoy that. If you don't like swimming, if it's a chore, you're probably not going to do the reps it's going to take to really improve. There's a reason why kids who swam from a young age swim well. It's not generally because they're strong, it's because they've done a lot of swimming and they enjoy swimming. But not to say you have to enjoy it all the time, but I think if you enjoy that process of I'm trying to improve, working on parts of your stroke, you're more likely to see progress. For me, it's about experimenting with different things. Now, I'll tell you some things, what I believe, what I think's right. You'll go home, open up YouTube, and you'll tell someone else says totally opposite thing, or maybe say the same thing slightly differently that resonates more with you. So I think go and look at different videos, try and think about it different ways. You might come up with your own way that works well. By all means, there's not a one size fits all. And I think when a lot of coaches will tell you this is how it has to be, it's really not true for swimming and most sports as well. So this is something I guess maybe hard to explain, but it's learning to interact with the water in different ways. Now the water obviously is kind of that fluid that we swim in. It's learning how to place yourself in the right position to make progress through the water that we need to do to swim, and hopefully I'll explain what that means in a little bit more detail. Some people call it feel the water, which is what you've seen. Might agree or disagree. I would say for most of us, 99% of us, cardiovascular fitness is rarely the limiter. Certainly if you do endurance sport, you've done some running, done some cycling, your cardiovascular system is probably not your limiting factor. You probably find, yes, you can get out of breath really quickly, but you're probably not getting to the point that you would maybe on a bike or a run. It's probably more your technique gets erratic, you lose form, and then you need more energy to go forward. It's probably not I think I was reading something recently, they were saying like, to improve your VO2 max in swimming, will give you something like a minute or two over an Ironman swim. Like by 10% of VO2 max improvement, that's a lot of improvement in VO2 max for a couple of minutes. Whereas if you could improve technique or reduce drag, it's 10, 15, 20% improvement. So it does become a limiter, but for most people it's probably not the limiter. True for a lot of us, don't compare yourself to others. It's easy to get caught up on what someone in the lane next to you or someone you know. Sometimes again it comes back to they might have just improved at a faster rate than you. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't improve, but I think we always look and go, oh, why is that person able to swim faster? Or there's a few reasons why, but stop comparing yourself to others. And especially the videos on Instagram, I've seen loads of them. I love this swimmer, and it looks amazing, and it looks just like they're not even trying to go through the water. And we're like, I want to swim like that. A lot of times you're probably not. They're probably built in certain ways, or they've done enough, so they probably swam more meters than you're ever going to swim. That actually allows them to do certain things. So that's really important as well. And again, it might look effortless. It's probably not. I think one of the things we often look at, anyone who's efficient at something, and swimming is about efficiency, it makes it look easy. It's like you look at a good runner, they don't look like they're trying hard. Watch the elite marathoners, they're just cruising. But to us to try and run that pace is like an absolute max effort. Even though it looks effortless, they're still working hard. Same with good swimmers, they're just so efficient that the movement doesn't look like it's a lot of work. Again, the key thing for me here is because it works for someone, it might not work for you. And again, that comes back to the experimentation on different things, trying different stuff and find what works for you. And the more of that you do, the sooner you're probably going to find what works. And for me, that was what motivated me to get into swimming. I wasn't a swimmer. I didn't come from a swim background. I got motivated because I wanted to figure out why the person in that lane swims faster than me. So you sit and watch them swim, you watch loads of people swim, start thinking about it differently, swimming more. All these things just start to kind of compound over time. And there's always someone else you're going to be able to look at and go, why the heck are they swimming now another 30 seconds quicker? So, things that limit swimming. So, what's our limiter? Shout out some things that we think limits us. Don't say fitness, because I've told you it's never fitness. Sorry? Technique. Technique, yeah, what specifically technique? What do you think? No technique. Anything related to technique? Who's like anything that they think from technique standpoint specifically? Rotation, yeah, that's always one.
Drag.
Sorry, drag, yeah, that's an important one. Probably one of the most important.
Body position.
Body position, yeah, part of drag, yeah.
Slow cadence.
Yeah, that's a good one actually. It's not one I've got specifically covered, but we will touch on it. From that, again, I want to come back to keeping it simple. There's kind of 3 areas. We will go into these in a little bit more detail. Number one for everybody is breathing. We need to breathe. We're not very good at not breathing. We're not like sea mammals that can spend hours and days up on under the water. We have to breathe fairly consistently. Unfortunately, with swimming, there's a time when we can and we can't breathe, and that's usually what limits a lot of people. It's not they can't breathe, they can breathe, they just don't time the breath right, which is I'm going to speak a little bit more about how to do that and things that limit that. Body position, that's a big one. Certainly if you come from a running background when your legs are 2 feet behind the water, that's a lot of drag you're going to have to overcome. So we want to try and reduce that or minimize as best we can. Propulsion, that's about how we push ourselves through the water, making obviously movement through forwards. I have put fitness in there because it can be a limiter, but it's not usually. Don't enjoy swimming, that's a big limiter, because if you don't enjoy swimming, you're probably not going to be doing enough to think about improving your breathing, improve your body position, get more propulsion, or improve any of that fitness. And again, it means we don't do it enough, or all of the above. And it usually is. There's never one, I don't think there's any one thing that ultimately limits our swimming. There's always a combination of them in different portions. Someone might struggle a little bit with breathing, they might be okay enough. It might be body position that's more important. And they might not enjoy swimming. It's all that kind of trade-off. But trying to figure out which part of those is the most important. If your breathing is your issue, you're probably the person that can't swim more than the length of getting out of breath. That's your biggest limiter by a long way.
Flexibility, and then that goes probably body position.
Yeah, no, it's a answer for one. Yeah, lack of mobility.
Age and flexibility.
Yeah, that's it. And then that goes back to finding a way that works. If you're limited mobility because you're getting older, there's other things you're going to not be able to do. You're not going to be able to swim like an elite swimmer that's got hypermobility in their shoulders. You're just not. So you need to find a technique and a style that's going to work for you. So no, that's a good point. But similar to that, about keeping it simple, it's often overcomplicated, I think, in swimming. Now, I'll probably overcomplicate it in this talk, but it often is overcomplicated. It's kind of all about, right, can we move forward through water is really what we're trying to do. Everything else we should be doing. And I think there, if you can do one or two things well or better, you're probably going to improve. But not time, I need to get so much faster in a certain time frame is what usually limits swimming, because then you start getting frustrated and you start trying to force the speed rather than actually relax and do two or three things well, one or two things well. Rather than try and do 6 things at once. So it's like find what is the biggest limiter and then focus on that, get that better, and then gradually add to that rather than go, right, your body position, head position, legs, not breathing properly, hate swimming, whatever it is, 10 things, you're just not going to fix any of them in reality. And this is also true for a lot of people where you watch the video on Instagram, seen the great swimmer, they've told you this is the best drill, this is the best technique to do, go and do that, so you start doing that, you find another video on Instagram or YouTube, tell you to do something totally different, start doing that, and you're constantly changing. And you never really do enough of it to find if what that previous one might have worked. So I think it's sometimes you have to be, although experiment with it. If something you're trying to get a result from something, spend enough time on it to see if it does actually work. If you're changing it every session, you're probably not going to spend enough time to actually get it working. And a lot of times it's probably going to get worse before it's going to get better. Your technique might feel worse, but it might actually be better, and we just need to build up reps on that. So in general, just in speaking about swimming here, is everything's related in swimming. So your body position will affect breathing, breathing will affect body position and propulsion. They all link into each other in some way. So this is where it starts to get more complicated. But we want to fix the issue. It comes from knowing what the main cause is. So a lot of times, and I've seen it with a few people as well, they're trying to fix a problem but not actually fix the thing that is the problem. They're fixing the thing that they think is the problem. That makes sense. Or like crossover is one which we'll speak about. That's often fixed in the wrong way, in my personal opinion. And it's not the reason. The reason they're crossing over is because of something else. So we'll come into a little bit of that and hopefully demyst that a little bit. So this is what I was saying about kind of trying to learn to kind of interact with the water. It's feeling based. You have to feel certain things in the water. If you don't feel certain things in the water, it's impossible to explain it to someone. So the easiest one to get ahead of that is trying to do sculling. Trying to explain to someone how to scull. If you don't know how to scull, it's really difficult to explain to someone because you just have to kind of feel that. And it's like you might be doing some of the movement, but if you're not feeling what it's meant to give you, you're not going to be doing it right. You're probably not getting that feeling. So for me, the goal with swimming is, can I get someone to feel something that's different hopefully it's in the right kind of context what we're trying to do, they can then practice that feeling of, right, that's what it should feel like. So certain things like hand entry, you might initially be entering too far, maybe coming a little bit earlier. That will feel wrong initially. That will feel horrible. But that's the feeling we're looking to get, right? Then you get to the point where that starts to feel natural. And then you start to go, right, I know where my hand's going into the water. And a lot of things I've seen with good swimmers is they know what they're doing. They've just spent so much time in the water. They can tell you exactly what they're doing because they just know how it feels. And I had one recently who was a really good swimmer. And he came in and he was just like saying, yeah, there's something not right with my left hand. It just doesn't feel right. And he didn't know what it was, took a little bit of video. And he knew that, yeah, his hand was slightly overextending. It was a small, say, good swimmer. So it was just a slight, small change he'd done for whatever reason because he hadn't been swimming as much. He made that small change and he felt swimming felt great again and made an improvement. And it was just because he knew something was not right. It's a bit like you go and jump on a saddle if it's slightly too long for you. If you've done enough cycling, you know pretty quickly that saddle height's not right. If you haven't done enough cycling, you probably won't notice it. So this is the thing, don't try to fight the water, okay? Although we are using kind of some strength, if we're in there wrestling the water, we're going to get tired really quickly. The water doesn't get tired. You will exceed your fitness level very quickly. And that's why people tend to perceive fitness as their limiter, because they're out of breath and they're getting tired. And it's probably because they're fighting the water, they're not feeling the water. So this is something as well, I'd say the stroke needs to be intentional and deliberate, but not forced. Again, a lot of people are trying to just grab themselves through the water rather than being positively doing something. I'll say hopefully I can explain what that something is. But fundamentally, swimming faster comes from a combination of reducing how much drag you have and increasing the amount of propulsion you can generate. In a combination of the less drag you have, the faster you're probably going to move through the water. The more propulsion you can generate, the faster you're going to go through the water. If you increase propulsion but increase drag, you're probably not going to go any faster. Yeah. And I think when we get into propulsion and drag is the biggest thing in swimming because how dense water is. You start increasing drag, the amount of propulsion you're going to need to overcome that exponentially goes up. And if people spent this equivalent money on swimming stuff, they would on cycling stuff to reduce drag, the gains are like 10 times over. You would go exponentially faster. But fundamentally, what we do, whether our stroke looks good, is good, whatever, it has to be sustainable. Even if you're doing a sprint triathlon, it's a 400 meter swim. You know, it's anywhere 10 minutes for some swimmers. That's an endurance event. So it has to be an event that's sustainable. If it's in triathlon specifically, the swim's the first part. So you need it to be somewhat comfortable and efficient so that you can get out and bike and run. Now, obviously, the longer that event is, the more impact it's going to have by being inefficient. But we have to find a stroke that we can maintain over time. And something that I would say to everyone, had a guy in the pool recently actually who could swim incredibly fast, like big strong guy, who's an ex-footballer, really strong, powerful stroke, but he couldn't swim more than 30 seconds. His issue was he just couldn't slow down. Like he was just getting pretty much fine in the water, but he was able to get so much power through the water, but it wasn't sustainable. So if he was going to swim for 50 meters, you'd keep up with a very good swimmer, but you asked him to do 100 or 200, he'd go at the back. Because the stroke was not sustainable and he was trying to go fast. Again, he's one that probably can go very fast, very quickly, over time, but he can't sustain it. So we need to get him to slow down a little bit to make it sustainable.
So what are you changing with that kind of person? What are you changing?
Trying to slow them down.
Slow them down. You're saying it's not fitness. But again, and it's all about feel of the water.
Yeah.
So this sort of almost the unmentionable thing about sort of. Okay, yeah, you get it, slow down. I get that.
So trying to get slow down.
So what is the thing that's limiting him? He's just going.
He's able to keep going because he's quite powerful and he's able to just probably has quite big hands. There's probably
he's straight up in his own floor and
yeah, he can swim at 50 really really quickly. And it's what we call your Arnies, is the guys that are like trying to wrestle the water. They're great for 50, and they're usually people that come from a strong sporting background because they're fit, strong, powerful. They get away with it in running and cycling. But as soon as swimming get in there, they get frustrated because they're out of breath after 50 metres and wonder why there's a 6-year-old girl flying up and down them in the pool, not even trying. And they'll be like, I hate swimming. But I'll come into hopefully some of the things that will capture that. The thing with our technique, again, about sustainability, it's more about taking good strokes over time. So when we're in a session, over a week, over a month, over years, is trying to take strokes that are slightly better over time. So we're trying to make a small change and repeat that more and more. So the strokes we take are good. Whereas what happens as we get tired, we start defaulting back to how we swim to now, we start losing that, and we're starting to take bad strokes. So there's a unique thing with swimming, and I think again goes back to feel. You want to get to the point where you know that your technique's starting to degrade, That's when you stop, that's when you climb out, or you take a longer rest, and you try and come back and get the technique right again. Because as soon as you lose technique, you're just going to start fighting the water, you're going to start slowing down. And anybody done that where they've got to a point where they're swimming well, and all of a sudden the speed just goes poof, even though the effort was up? That's something I'd say, like certainly early winter, is don't have necessarily a distance in mind. Obviously it's not a session, but if you feel that I'm starting to lose my technique, I'm starting to get scrappy, stop, take a longer rest, maybe get out, go to the toilet, whatever, come back, see if you can get it back again. If not, climb out and go home, come back the next day and try and do the same thing again. That again, over 2, 3, 4 sessions, potentially even if you only maybe swim 400 or 500 meters in that first session, gradually over time you're doing more good technique, more good strokes. That will accumulate over time. Rather than doing 400 meters with okay technique, another 500 meters of really rubbish technique, and the rest of it was just kind of brute force and getting through it, you've then potentially spent another 1500 meters in the pool, and most of it wasn't actually helping you improve. You're just spending more time in the pool, not getting faster. Although it's harder because the pool does take time, getting to the pool changes everything. But being disciplined with that is something that can help swimming. And whether your stroke looks good or not, the stroke has to be maintainable. I think too many people are focused on the stroke looking good rather than actually finding something that is going to work. There's plenty of really good swimmers that do not look pretty. And I'll show you some examples when we get later into a bit towards the end, of swimmers that if you look at them, if you see them swimming in a lane, you're like, oh my god, they're not good swimmers, until you see how fast they swim. And I think that sometimes is from coaches as well, is they're trying to make you into this kind of certain type of swimmer, and it's maybe not how you should be. Certainly if you lack in mobility, there's certain movements you're just not going to be able to do. You need to adapt that and learn from that. And I think some people get too fixated on what it looks like rather than what it actually does. I mean, Lucy Charles, who just won the Ironman World Championships, is a classic example of that. Not a pretty swimmer by any means, but a very effective swimmer. And she really found her thing when she went longer, went into open water swimming, her improvements, and started then really winning things. I mean, she was doing well at, like, she was a high level swimmer anyway, but like she's just never quite at that top pool level. As soon as she went open water, it was like, you know, close to qualifying for the Olympics on that. I think went to triathlon and realised her swim was actually quite a big strength in how she swam. Again, come back to swim fitness is really limited. Any questions on that so far? So that's just the general stuff out of the way. So breathing. It's probably the most important aspect of improving our swimming. And even if breathing isn't necessarily an issue for you, learning to improve it will probably improve your swimming. Because if you can get enough oxygen in, you can relax, you can start to slow things down, you can start to, your brain can actually process what it's doing. Go and jump in cold water, what happens? You start to hold your breath, you start to panic. As soon as you can get that, you know, doing things like what Wim Hof speaks about, that big deep breath, just controlling your breath, you can stay there for a lot longer. As soon as you start to panic and stress, think of anxiety, that kind of stuff, it's like chest starts to clam up, you just start to lose that breath. You're not going to be able to make improvements if you're doing that. So the key thing to that is learning to exhale into the water. Now this is the bit that usually people struggle with initially if they don't breathe properly, is they hold their breath when their face is in the water. It's take a breath, stroke, 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 oh I need to breathe again, and then they lift their head, and it's like they're trying just not to drown. They're not actually in any control of what they're doing, they're just panicking, the heart rate goes up because their brain's not getting enough oxygen, it's starting to panic, and basically the brain thinks it's drowning. It's controlled drowning or uncontrolled drowning in a lot of cases, so we need to learn to breathe out into the water. And that's quite difficult because there's obviously pressure in the water, so we have to overcome that as well. For some people, like literally get them in the water and you tell them to exhale and they don't, they just can't, because they haven't learned that breathing out process in there, and I think that's something that's really important to do. I say that's usually because then they hold their breath and stroke, 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 stroke until their brain sends out a signal to remind them to breathe again, and it's just a cycle of that. And it's why people can probably get away with 25 meters, because it's long enough that you can probably hold your breath for it. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we can get that breathing relaxed. And the thing that we see with that, if you're holding your breath, what tends to happen, because you now don't have a full breath in, you're holding your breath, stroke, 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 right, I need to breathe again, you then also have to breathe out and breathe in a very short space of time. So it becomes a and it's then a panic, you don't get a full breath, you're inhaling the room of oxygen. So what you then tend to see is you'll use your hand to then lift your head up to try and extend how long you've got to breathe. So this hand, usually whichever hand it is, left hand, to breathe to the right, presses down, allows you to get your whole head out of the water to give you a little bit longer to go, but at the same time your legs have just sunk, and then because this hand's now here, it's dropped off, you've got nothing supporting you in the water, and you just keep it going, and it just perpetually loops, does that. So you end up doing something that looks like this. We shouldn't slag the person, looks a bit like the guy from the Goonies. He's not here, so it's fine. Hope he doesn't watch the video. So what's happening here is this person here is using that left hand to lift their head out, and it's like you can see like their face is like gasping for air. It's literally like they've been held under the water, till their last breath. That's just going to cause legs to sink. That left arm is then going to press down in the water. They are going to get a slightly better breath, but they're still not going to be relaxed. They're just going to be. And what happens is, because of everything else, the right arm comes round. It's not going to get a stroke because it's going to then try and stabilize itself, and you're just going to go round in that cycle for 3 or 4 times. So the best thing you can do for this person is teach them just to exhale in the water and slow it down and relax. You don't even need to start with swimming. You can just get them relaxed and just focus on breathing, which I'll come into some examples of. Yeah, causes the legs to sink, which increases our drag. We lose our ability to then create propulsion. So because our breathing's not good, we've now got more drag and we're not generating any propulsion. It's a double whammy. We're sinking and we're going slower. And because of that, they have to start increasing their stroke rate. So their arms start to turn faster to get to the next breath because there's no real propulsion and there's a lot of drag. Now they're using more and more oxygen, so they need to breathe more often. So it's just this now loop that they're kind of stuck in, which just goes round in circles until they get to the end, stop for a few minutes, catch their breath again. And they get frustrated because they're just trying very hard and going nowhere. And that's usually why people say, yeah, my fitness isn't very good. If you can run a couple of miles comfortably, swimming, fitness overall is not going to be your limiter for most people. It's probably because this is happening. Knackered after 25 metres, which is quite true. So something that's interesting with that, should we breathe to both sides? What's people's personal? Yeah?
Useful.
Useful, yeah.
Not essential.
Not essential, yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of, to me again, it depends on what's sustainable. It comes back to, it has to be sustainable. For some people, breathing to one side is going to be more sustainable now for them, which is going to allow them to take more of those good strokes, which over time is going to allow them to be more confident and improve technique, which is potentially going to open up the ability to breathe to the side that they're less comfortable with. Whereas a lot of the time people say, no, you need to breathe to both sides because it's more symmetrical for your stroke. That rhythm for them might not be right to now, and then they start to hold the breath again because it's just slightly too long. So for me, it's you want the ability to breathe to either sides, but you need to find in your stroke, for me, should always be built on whatever breathing pattern feels most natural. As I say, you can always change that later once you're more relaxed, once you're more comfortable in the water. If your breathing's not good, it doesn't matter what side you breathe to, it doesn't matter how often you breathe, you just need to make sure you're able to stay relaxed by getting sufficient oxygen in.
I found that in open water, there's a disadvantage in always breathing on the same side from the point of view of where the sun is.
Yeah, exactly.
Glaring in your eye or keeping track of how far you are. I was swimming down the length of the beach. It was a pain in the arse.
Well, yeah, because mouth full of water, breathe to the right.
See where it was.
So in like that instance, that's definitely one where like that, and as I say, that skill of being able to breathe to either side. If from a technical standpoint, if you're just trying to get to swim a couple of lengths non-stop, don't worry too much about breathing to both sides. Again, even then, it was like I would still get the person to breathe to the other side to 2 if that was their preferred rhythm, because then they can easily go 1, 2, 1, 2, or even 4 for some people. Because someone who's that 3 is just that slightly too far between the strokes that just starts to cause them to tense up, starts to cause them to lose the breath. So yeah, still go to 2, breathing every length. And if you actually look at it, a lot of your elite swimmers breathe to one side. They can breathe to either side, but they'll breathe, and a lot of it's strategy as well. So elite pool swimmers will tend to breathe depending on where their competition is. Just keep an eye on them to check to see if they're making a change in effort. In open water as well, you'll tend to see that they're doing it to see where other swimmers are, and they 9 times out of 10 are breathing to one side, and they'll maybe change periodically. So for me, it's not that you have to breathe to both sides. You want the ability to breathe to either, but it's whatever's going to allow you to stay relaxed and initially accumulate more good strokes. Does that make sense? And then if this plays, hopefully. So what you can see here now, not a good example because I'm quite a very good swimmer, is again it looks quite effortless. So it's someone who looks like very easy swimming. But see when they breathe there, their head doesn't lift much. They turn to the side, take a breath. They're breathing out into the water, which you can't really see from here. They're in control of what's happening. They're not fighting for the water. They're obviously a very different swimmer to the previous one, but what they're doing there is able to stay relaxed. They're able to focus on what they're doing. So, some tips to help us improve if this is an issue with you, or you're maybe working with people who have this issue. Start with exhalation, starting to learn to exhale. And even starting outside the pool, learn to just take a breath in and then a little bit more of a forced breath out. That, getting that air out. It's not a natural thing for us to ultimately do. I always equate it to like you're out doing a run, for example, a park run, and you start picking up the pace a little bit faster. We're getting rid of that air, we're making sure we're getting enough air in. But it's making sure that when our face goes in the water, we breathe out. We're making sure we're blowing bubbles. Start in the shallow end. If you're not a confident swimmer, if really breathing is your issue, start with just in the shallow end. Swim where you can stand, where you're not going to be out of your depth, and just practice putting your face in the water and breathing out. It makes a huge difference once you get someone to do this right. You can do it in the sink or the bath. I've told this to a few people, I don't know if anyone's ever done it. You might feel a bit weird doing it. It's actually sometimes harder if it's a smaller kind of sink, but if you don't want to go to the pool because you're embarrassed or because breathing's really an issue and you feel that you're just going to kind of not be there for very long, start in your house, just basin of water, practice just probably warm water rather than cold water, practice just learning to exhale and breathe out. You can then progress that if you're in the pool to using a float out in front. So just getting comfortable with that position here, and again you don't even need to start thinking about swimming yet, just hold that float out and just get comfortable turning the head to the side. Take a breath, breathe out. Turn to the side, breathe in again. More and more of that you get comfortable with, it starts to become a bit more natural, and then you naturally start to be able to exhale. Also, if you can't swim front crawl yet, do it while you're doing your breaststroke. I see it with quite a lot of people who want to go from breaststroke to front crawl, and they're doing head up breaststroke, or when they do breaststroke, they hold their breath. And you get away with it more in breaststroke because you can just lift your head up to breathe. When we start to do front crawl, our arms are moving, and there's a lot more movement generally, and you want to learn to turn to the side, you're going to struggle to do that. Whereas if you're doing breaststroke, just basically lift your head up, when your face goes in the water, breathe out. And I've seen it with quite a few people, just doing it with breaststroke allows them to go relatively quickly into doing front crawl from that. So if you can't do front crawl just now, that's a great way to start. Just do some breaststroke, but practicing breathing out, especially if you're struggling to swim a length. Now if you can't do breaststroke, a wee bit harder, but you can even do backstroke, just even though you're not facing out in the water, it's just being in that position while moving, practice taking in some breath, where you're not having to worry about kind of your face being in the water. But fundamentally, prioritize staying relaxed and in control. Again, that is the key thing, is think about trying to stay relaxed. If your breathing's right, it's easier to stay relaxed. If your breathing's not right, you will not be able to relax. So if someone is doing that, or if you find someone is like that, just remind them, right, relax, slow it down, don't rush it, it's not trying to get all the air out in a really short space of time, it's just a breathe out into the water. And again, try and find a rhythm with it. 1, 2, 3, breathe. And then once you get that rhythm going, it's a lot easier to keep it going.
I remember a session that you organised at the RGU pool with David Carey and his girlfriend, and he asked the people that were taking part, he said, how do you think you look when you can pop your head out?
Yeah.
People were a bit confused. He said, you all look angry, you know, because you're gasping mostly. And he said, if you learn to relax and bring more control in, you don't look as angry, you don't gasp. So the main thing I took away from that was to bring control into it, was breathe out through your nose in the water and in through your mouth when you're above. And that made a huge difference from using your mouth in both.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Another something I mentioned in here is actually breathing out through mouth and nose. I don't think it matters fundamentally for the individual, it's finding what works. Some people are better through the mouth, some people are better through their nose, but if that works, I tend to breathe out through my nose and in through the mouth with it. I'd say it's harder to breathe in through your nose when you're swimming. There's just not enough time to. Unless you've got huge nostrils, it's maybe a bit easier, but it's quite hard to do. So you're probably going to use your mouth, but you don't have to breathe out through your nose. You can breathe out through your mouth and in through your mouth. It's completely fine.
But it just slows down, and you're actually, I think, more controlled when you're breathing out through your mouth. Sorry, out through your nose, because there's a limit to how much you can push out at any one time. You can't do it the way you can with your mouth, so it just slows the process down a bit.
Slows your ventilation down as well.
I thought to breathe in or out through my nose and my swimming. All the years I've been doing it.
I'd be surely when you tumble turn, you know if you weren't breathing out your nose.
Well, yeah, I was thinking you get a tick around your nose, but.
Oh no, I might have to stop if I'm not breathing my nose.
Just not.
Yeah.
Maybe I am, I just don't know.
And certainly with chlorine being there as well, breathing in all the chlorine fumes is probably not good. So yeah, fundamentally with that, however you find it works, is if you're not relaxed, it's fundamentally going to be difficult to swim for long enough to work on the other aspects of the stroke. So if breathing is your limiter, everything else should be secondary, and we need to learn how to breathe first and then progress from there.
Thanks.
Sure.
So does it matter, would you get into a routine, because sometimes if I start swimming, I might not need a breath till 4 instead of 2 at the start, then as I get further into it I might do 2, or would you always just do 2 to get into that routine of 1, 2?
When you start to panic, your brain will force you to go to what it needs, so you'll go to 2, which is probably where you would start. It's a bit like taking nutrition, and I'm not going to go into nutrition in this, but it's like you want to start as soon as you start rather than wait till you need it, because once you need it, it's probably already too late. So it's like getting that right, starting 1, 2, 1, 2. You'll find that rhythm. Because what's probably happening there is you're going until your brain goes, hold on, you're going to need to breathe now, and then you're now panicked, and then you're back to 2. You'll probably find if you can slow everything down, 3 or 4 is probably going to be easier. But I would start pretty much as soon as you start with the wall, get into that rhythm. 1, 2, breathe. 1, 2, breathe.
Is it worth what I always say to the swimmers when they start breathing, exhalation? Your brain actually isn't saying I need oxygen. It's saying I've got too much CO2. Because your CO2 receptors are very, very strong. So obviously you've got to breathe out the CO2 in your lungs to get the next oxygen. So that keeps it down, and you can breathe 16% oxygen quite adequately, but you can't.
CO2.
Breathe,
it's probably
you can't breathe with 1% CO2.
So it's more the CO2 reaction.
And that is the panic. That's the brain.
It's fair. But and even the thing like we can hold our breath for quite a long period of time if we're relaxed. You can't hold your breath for long if you're not relaxed. You think like these guys that go like deep diving is like they have to learn to slow everything down and get the breathing rate right down, get the body needing less and less oxygen. They can stay underwater for a long, long period of time, but they're still relaxed. As soon as you lose that relaxing, because you see a shark or something, you're going to panic. You're going to need breath for a lot sooner. You're going to use your oxygen tank up really quickly if you're breathing in an oxygen tank. So it's fundamentally about staying relaxed. So it's again whatever works for you is the right answer. Body position. So hopefully our breathing improved. We're relaxed in the water. Now we need to think about how do we reduce drag in the water. So if you look like that, drag's a big issue. Think of this as like going out on your bike with a massive parachute behind you. You might be able to do 400 watts, but this thing's always going to slow you down. You're going to need to do 400 watts, otherwise you're going to start going backwards. So we want to try and get this person as high in the water as we possibly can. Something like that would be not too bad. So you see the difference there, like different drag from there.
Showing off, Kevin.
I know.
I don't recognise you.
It's an old video as well. But ultimately, we're trying to get the body higher in the water. So it fundamentally is about what I'd say here. This sounds really hard to explain. Creating tension through the abdominals. So we're trying to use our core muscles, our trunk, to hold ourselves high in the water. So we want to think about getting these deep muscles engaged, and we want to make sure they're going to be the thing that holds us up. It's a bit like if you had 2 pieces of string on either side and you gradually pull either end, that string will start to tense and it'll come under tension. It'll stay on top of the water. So we want to think about, so it's a couple of things you can think about is, imagine you're trying to pull your belly button in towards your spine, but it's not holding your breath. Some people do. It's really about thinking about standing up nice and tall, thinking about extending the core, opening all that position up here. I seen one recently, it was about just thinking about sucking in the bottom rib, pulling that in towards you. If you even try that while you're sitting, you'll feel like everything's starting to open up, and you should feel some tension in the core.
I have a bit of difficulty separating pulling in my diaphragm and holding my breath.
Okay.
But when I try and do that, sometimes I do try and focus on that, I tend to not breathe out properly.
What about trying to think about lengthening your stomach out? So like pulling the chest up, stomach down.
Get your chest up.
No, I mean again, it's like it's because it's a feeling based thing. It's really hard to explain it to someone. It's like you can either feel it, or you can. Try loads of different things. I mean, even like things if you do like a plank position, try and play a little bit with what happens when you move around. Think about different things. Where do you feel that there's like stability in the trunk? It's really about stability.
The whole basis of Pilates it's called. So.
Yoga and stuff.
Do it on shore and get some Pilates classes.
If you can't feel it out the water, you don't. If you can't feel it out of the water, you're probably not going to feel it in the water. But what that's going to do is that tension is going to create a little bit more of being able to hold you on top of the water. and it's then going to allow you to create some propulsion from that strong position. And I'll explain that in just a bit more. But again, one of the things that affect our body position is we tend to lift our head, not always because of breathing, it usually is because of breathing, is as we're swimming here, our head pops up, which causes our legs to sink. It can also be if your head's slightly too high in the water. So a lot of people tend to, certainly if they've had breathing issues, will tend to swim head looking straight forward. Now that can work for some people, it's a really rare thing. You don't see many people that can hold their head high and their legs stay quite high. Again, there's not an exact head position. I'm not going to say you need to look straight down because most cases you don't. The worse your legs sink, the more you probably do need to look further down, I would say in most cases. But it's not really about necessarily having the head straight up and not necessarily having the head straight down. Again, that's something I get people to do, is play a little bit with it. What happens if you lower your head? Does your legs start to come up? If you look a bit further forward, do your legs sink? And find that sweet spot. You'll know when you get it right. You will just feel an instant improvement in body position from that. Something that's quite common when you get people to think about core engagements are anterior pelvic tilt, where it basically means you get like lordosis in the lower back, so you end up with an arch in your back. Sometimes we have that if we spend loads of time on a bike where our hip flexors are really tight. If you get someone to think about really stretching up, they sometimes will automatically go into that position. If they're here, they're not creating tension in the right place, they're creating tension in the lower back. So we need to try and get them to think about pulling that stomach forward. Again, it's more posture than necessarily just swimming, but I've seen it with some people and it does affect rotation if you get that. I'll explain that in the rotation. If you're rotated in the pelvis, you're going to tend to rotate more from your upper back rather than through the hips that we want. So we want to try and keep that back as flat as we can. Now if your hip flexors are tight, you want to try and loosen that off so that they bring in there. Usually find it's good runners that have that in most cases. They have that slightly arch in their back because it actually helps you use your glutes a little bit more effectively. So it's sometimes a curse of being a good runner. Ideally you want that back to be flat. But one of the things that often happens, usually because we lift our head, or what we do with rotation, which is in the next phase, is we end up off balance, which means that our legs start to sink because our legs start to kick out trying to gain balance. We want to try and keep ourselves balanced from that. And again, if we're stabilized through our core, we're less likely to go off balance. Does that make sense? Again, improper rotation can cause that. So who's more of a runner than a swimmer? Just out of interest. People, probably most people. You happen, more have. It depends, yeah, where you're at. But generally speaking, ankle mobility can be a big issue for runners. They just don't have the same flexibility that a swimmer tends to have. So if you were going to draw a good swimmer, ankle flexibility should be quite high on your list because it's a key thing there, because it basically means that ankle and foot flexes like a fin. So it can definitely help. But if you're running, you want some stiffness. If you've got a really floppy ankle and you try and run, you're probably constantly going to go over it. And you see that quite a lot. Good swimmers, and I think probably happened more during COVID and lockdown, a lot of swimmers couldn't get to the pool, started getting into running, and some of them were quite... Usually find swimmers can make very good runners once they get some stiffness in the joints, but it also limits their swimming. So you want to find that if you're a good swimmer, you want to try and get a little bit of ankle stiffness to help you running. But if you're a really good runner, you probably can afford to lose some of that stiffness to help you in swimming, because you end up looking like something like that, where your ankle's kicked down. And again, I'll come into something a little bit with this, with something we can do. But if your ankles are like that, that's not something you're going to fix by swimming more. That's just something you can work on a little bit outside the pool. And you might be, I've seen people who've had their ankle fused because they've had surgery or whatever. You're never going to get them flexing their foot like some people can. So you probably don't want to spend too long trying to do it. You just want to okay, that's what I'm working with. What can I do to help that? Which is what we're doing. Yeah. So the things you can do to improve your body position is work on feeling your abdominals hold your body up. So working on getting that kind of core engagement, whether you go to Pilates, yoga, do it at the gym yourself, whatever, or just play with it in the pool. Finding that feeling that helps. Again, just that, if you lie, and it's hard to do, if you ever try, me and Calvin, a video of Calvin trying to do it in the endless pool actually, where it's literally just lie in the pool and just hold yourself there, like without moving. It's really difficult to do. Like, and Hannah Miley does some stuff here. She's got some incredible videos of her doing stuff where she can literally rotate upside down, let herself sink, come back up, just using the abdominal strength. Where most of us are never going to get there. But literally, we tried it. Like Calvin's legs. Because of that ability and sometimes just awareness of being in the water. It's like a fish. It can just divert and change really easily because it's got so much control over its kind of space in the water. We don't need to get to that level of kind of fluidity in the water, although if you do, you'll probably be a pretty good swimmer. But definitely learning to hold that core engagement is really important. Ideally, we're looking to get your heels to break the surface, ideally. So as you kick, you just want to have those heels just breaking through the surface. Don't want to have them flying out of the water, which is sometimes an issue if you're a good swimmer or someone with good body position and you swim with wetsuits on, certainly more buoyant wetsuits. It's going to take you too far and you end up getting a sore lower back because the buoyancy of the wetsuit's lifting you too high up. Although for us, if you're people guys are probably more susceptible to problems with legs sinking in most cases. The advantage nowadays is if you're a triathlete, you can spend a bit of money and get a decent wetsuit that's going to give you more buoyancy. Although you still want to improve it more without the wetsuit, but there is kind of, I guess, tricks. And it's frustrating if you're a good swimmer and you go into open water swimming, you've got a triathlete whose their main issue is body position. They put a decent wetsuit on and they're keeping up with you, which can be quite frustrating if you're used to lapping them in the pool comfortably. So it's definitely harder if you have longer legs. So if you're, again, a runner's type build and you've got longer legs relative to your torso, it's harder to keep your legs higher because that leverage point is much further away. So where you're trying to gauge from is here. If you've got another couple of feet behind you, that's a lot harder to do. You're more likely to create drag. Now, if you've got long legs and poor ankle mobility, your legs are probably going to be your issue. Again, so if you're a runner's build, it's probably going to be your main issue. Usual build runners. The thing that's interesting with that, I was reading a thing quite recently, and it was to do with Haile Gebrselassie and Michael Phelps. So I think Phelps is 6'6" and Gebrselassie is 5'4". Gebrselassie inside leg is longer than Phelps's. Yeah. So I think it's like, and it's like I can't remember what I think his so I can't remember what it is in centimeters, but Gebrselassie is 5'4", which is what 150 something centimeters. And his inside leg is the equivalent of someone who should be 176 centimeters. So yeah, if you're going to draw a runner, he's probably close to what you draw. But the thing with Phelps that you get into is like he's got very short legs and he's got massive feet. It's literally perfect. It's like if you wanted to draw, if you were going to birth a perfect specimen for swimming, he'd be pretty close to what you would come up with. Huge feet, short legs, relatively long torso, incredibly flexible. Like hypermobile through virtually every joint he has. I think they were saying his ankle flexibility is 30% better than the average person. So his ankle moves 30% greater than any of ours does. And it's something like 8% better than most other swimmers, elite swimmers. Which is 10% improvement in your ankle mobility. With this big fin connected to quite a short limb, is probably perfect. So we shouldn't be trying to swim like him, unless you're in those same... now if you're more like Gebrselassie, maybe take up more running than swimming. But you can improve in those areas. It just means it's harder for you to do things with your body position because you're at a disadvantage because of something that's an advantage in running. Now if you're somewhere in the middle, then kind of take both maybe. Again, focus on body position, focus on holding good posture, but try not to let that back arch. As you get tired, you will start to find that back arching. So when we think about what we're doing in swimming, we want to try and do a session that will allow us to maintain that position longer. Yeah, that's our more good strokes, being able to hold the position for longer. So if you want to keep the interval short, get the posture right, do the interval, keep that there. When it starts to go, take a longer rest, reset it, come back. You will, if you do this right, you'll gradually get some core strength just from focusing on it when you swim. Rather than focus on trying to go faster and forget about it, which is what most people tend to do. Again, if you're strong through the abdominals, we've got something solid to push against, which is us. We're creating tension. So it's like you're lying on a surfboard and you're paddling along on top of the water to get out to where the waves are. You've got a physical object that you're effectively anchoring yourself against. So you're pushing forward on that solid object. When we're not on a surfboard, when it's us, we need to create that tension. So I sometimes think about that. I'm lying on top of a surfboard and there's a solid object here that I've got something to push myself against. And that comes back to feeling. If you get this right when we swim, you should effectively feel the opposite side of your kind of core, the obliques here. You should feel some tension in that as you start your propulsive phase in swimming. Now, if you don't, you're probably not getting one of those things right. Either your arm's not in the right position, or you're not getting this engagement right. But we want to create something solid to create propulsion from, because ultimately in the water, there's nothing pushing you forward. Yeah, we need to create that ourselves. So using a pull buoy can help. If you're a long-limbed, poor ankle mobility person, a pull buoy can help. And I put this in here, it's not cheating or bad for your swimming as some people will tell you to believe. If they do tell you that, you can show them where to put the pull buoy. Because it's going to allow you to take more good strokes. Now, it is artificially doing it, but if you're limited because your ankle mobility is really poor, because you've had ankle fusions or whatever, the pull buoy can massively allow you to swim a lot further and maintain focus on something else that's probably going to return better gain. Again, if you get someone who's trying to improve their swimming, and kicking can help improve your body position, but if you've got really poor ankle mobility, and again coming back to your runner build, long legs, kicking more is probably going to make you more tired and probably make you slower. So we don't necessarily want to focus too much on kicking lots. Certainly when your ankle mobility is poor, you're actually better getting that person to kick less, because it will help keep their body position higher, and the pull buoy is going to allow them to do that. So yeah, it's never cheating. Try not to get to the point where it's like a crutch and you can't swim without it, but it's there as an aid to help you swim a bit further, take more good strokes, work on something else within your stroke. And you tend to find as you're able to start swimming faster, it's easier to keep your legs higher. Yeah, because that natural movement of the water underneath helps lift the legs higher. So yeah, it's not cheating. But again, keep focusing on trying to hold the tension. So most people put the pull buoy in, right, put the buoy in, right, I'll keep up with the person in the lane now, rather than put the pull buoy in and think about what it's doing and thinking about that engagement with the core. So the thing to me to help improve that is every time you push off the wall, again people speak about streamlining, although most of us don't really do that well, but when we push off the wall we think about getting that position right, so we think about creating that nice long position as we push off, kick, 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 kick for a few, and then you start swimming. Yeah, so start always every length with that engagement right, and then you start from there, rather than push off the wall and your arms and legs are going really quickly. It's right, nice and tight through your good push off the wall, and then just as you start to slow down you can start to focus on what you're doing with the rest of the stroke. That's going to allow you to accumulate more time doing it. Again, holding posture while exhaling to breathe until you need to breathe. So push off the wall, kick, 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 kick. Just as you start to break in, right, I need that breath, break into a stroke. Again, you can do that as just a drill on its own. Just push off the wall. With fins is usually easier, certainly if you've not got good kick mechanics. Kick, 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 kick. When you need to breathe, lift your head up with the skull, back into that position, often called torpedo kicking as well. And if you really struggle with body position and breathing, because it's too many things to think about, do it on your back. Start on your back, push off the wall, get that streamline position, get the core engaged, kick, 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 and you can work on holding that position. It's a lot easier usually to keep your body position higher on your back. Any questions on any of that?
See with body position.
Yeah.
With like, kind of, I've heard the term that you should swim like you're going downhill. How does it work with like the rest of your body? Like, what should it be feeling head-wise, shoulder-wise in the water? Okay,
that's a good question. Yeah, so I've heard that as well. Swimming like downhill and going can help, although sometimes it ends up meaning that your arms and everything go too deep. Effectively, what you want to feel as you're swimming is that you're feeling that water, you're cutting through that water with your head. And effectively you're wanting to create that bow wave effect as you cut through the water, which is why sometimes if your head's too high, it ends up hitting your forehead and you don't get the same effect in bow wave. And what we're trying to do when we swim is that as we breathe into that bow wave. But when we get into, which is the next bit, rotation, is we're wanting to basically swim on that axis. We're not wanting to deviate from that. What tends to happen when people swim, because they're off balance all the time, is they're moving everywhere, everything's moving, their head's moving, they're lifting their head, rather than just moving in that one plane, which then means I don't need to move too much off that balance. Can I answer your question?
That you wouldn't want your whole head submerged, or
I mean,
you don't want to almost be pointing down.
No, again, it's like a head position. So the water is going to be just like, so even if you're looking straight down, the water is going to be here somewhere. At no point do you want to be, which can be an issue if we spend so much time on phones, where you've got a position here with your neck being arched. Is that something I would say that with the postures we want to think about keeping that all in alignment. So I always say to some people, imagine that someone's stuck a javelin up here, you know what, see, and it comes out the top. You would be forced to stand there like this with a really strong posture. Obviously the javelin's keeping you there, it's basically like a skewer that's looking down, no visualize show that. But you're standing there and everything's here, it's basically like a toothpick through that. Everything here is going to rotate on that axis now, and you will feel that your posture in that position there is better. And that's effectively what we're trying to do when we swim, is we're just rotating on that position here, with our head being, I'd say, neutral. But depending on the head position, for some people it might be straight down. I think most people are going to gain from it being couple of meters in front of them. Say very few people are going to get away with their head being here. Although generally people can do it, it tends to be better swimmers in most cases. That kind of answers it.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So rotation. So I kind of explained a little bit of that. It's about turning the body as one. What tends to happen for most people, mainly because they're not engaging the core properly, or they've got an arch in their back. They twist more from the upper back, so they're turning to breathe, and they're mainly the upper chest. It turns here. If you imagine I'm in that position, what are my legs going to do? Probably, yeah. What else? They're going to stick out, yeah, because I'm now starting to go off balance, because this movement here is twisted, So I'm now starting to get off balance, and I'm probably going to press down with this hand. I'm going to use this leg to try and balance me out again, and then I'm going to come back to here, and I'm never going to get that much propulsion. I'm just going to twist myself. I'm going to put a lot of strain on my lower back. And you see it with quite a lot of people, something similar to this. It's quite hard to see in this angle, but the back's quite flat here. That upper back is twisting quite a lot, and you can see the spine twist. Now our spine's flexible, so we get away with it, and the more flexible you are through your thoracics, the more you're going to get away from it. So it's why you'll see some people can swim really well and not rotate, is because they can get their thoracic round and their arm still clears the water comfortably. Where if you're really tight through here, you're not going to get any movement in the arms, and you're just going to use your shoulders to swim and not the key drivers in swimming. So you want to make sure that, as I was saying there, that core engagement, back relatively flat, it rotates everything together as one. So our hips are what are turning. It's your obliques that really do it. It's that movement turning again, that javelin in the centre, and someone's rotating you side to side on that position. Ideally something like that. Not perfect either, but pretty good. Now this is a swimmer who's a very good swimmer, very, very flexible. And you can see, so they are still rotating a little bit more from their upper back, but their hips are definitely a lot more rotated. They're a little bit closer to being on their side. How much rotation? It depends on a couple of factors. I've seen it with some really good elite swimmers. I don't know if anyone's come across a guy, Adam Oceanwalker. I've seen him. He's quite an interesting guy to watch. Got some quite good stuff. No, I don't know if his name. I don't know if his name is Oceanwalker. I don't think it is. He does like distance sea swimming stuff. Like you watch him swim, and he is rotating huge amounts, like 90 degrees every side. And he teaches stuff on that, and some people get away with it. Probably works for him. He's quite tall, got quite long limbs. So he probably gets away with that long, powerful stroke because he's got huge levers he can generate. If you're 5'2" or built like Gabriel Selassie, it probably isn't going to work for you. But his rotation is probably the other extreme. Most of us don't have the core stability or the balance when we turn to breathe. If we try and rotate that much, you're probably going to rotate onto your back and spend more time just losing balance. If you rotate from the upper back, say you create instability, something's going to kind of counter that, which is usually going to be your legs splaying out. It's also going to limit how much you can open out and rotate through the front of the shoulder. So you're going to come into here, you're going to do that rather than do that. So as soon as that rotation starts to happen here, I start to be able to open up my armpit a lot more to start the front part of the stroke. Whereas if I don't do that, I'm going to tend to come into here, then press down. I'll tend to then swim here. And it's why usually you'll see your stroke rate starts to go up as you start to tire as well, because you lose that rotation. So you're starting to just twist. Everything's getting faster and faster and faster, except you. So again, this is going to depend on how flexible you are through your shoulders. The more flexible you are, the less rotation you're going to need. You can get away with more. The less flexibility, the more rotation you're probably going to need. So it comes back to what Andy was saying earlier. If you get a bit older, generally the thing we lose as we get older is flexibility. That's going to impact how much rotation you're going to need. You're probably going to need to learn to rotate more. Whereas if you've got huge flexibility, really hypermobile through some of your joints, you can probably get away with less rotation. Which is why it comes back to people who aren't getting that rotation sometimes don't actually need to, because they've already got good flexibility into it.
I didn't understand.
Sure.
Minimize stroke extension and recovery.
Yeah, so I should have said the recovery actually there. So if you're not rotating from the hip, this arm is going to have to swing a lot more. So I'll get Callum to come and demonstrate. So it's lying on the ground.
Oh god.
Hopefully we can explain this for anybody listening. So put one arm at the back, one arm at the front. Right, now I want you to get that left arm forward to the front of the stroke. So he's using his shoulders massively there. Right, so you go, yeah. If you've got flexible, I've got really flexible shoulders, I can do it quite easily. Whereas Callum's not so flexible. Where if you turn a little bit more to your side, Callum. So yeah, about that, perfect. So he's now got no load on his shoulder, so that arm's going to recover easier. Yeah. And part of that's going to allow him to extend that arm better. Where if this arm is just here, he's not going to be able to extend here. Yeah. That makes sense? Yeah. Again, that's a good little drill and experiment to try. Like, so if you lie on the ground and you can get your arm round, you've probably got pretty good shoulder mobility. If you can't do it, you're probably going to need to learn to rotate more. And it also engages the back muscles. If we get the rotation right, we start to use our lats and huge kind of drivers, and also use our chest when we swim, rather than what most people tend to use, which is these muscles, the shoulders. And it's usually always, you see someone stand inside the pool, stretching all here because they're really tight through here, because that's the muscles they're using to swim. They're stabilizers of your head and neck, and shoulder, they're not designed to generate power, or not a lot of power. So if we can get that rotation a little bit more, we can start to use the chest and the lat to generate that power. So we're using bigger muscles to do the work. It's going to be more efficient. Also helps with breathing. So if you're just twisting here, again, you go off balance, you're not maybe going to get a breath, where if I'm getting that rotation, I'm more likely to have this arm to help me support to breathe. Does that make sense? Easier arm recovery, which you kind of spoke about, takes the load off the shoulder. Said there, forget about high elbows. Doesn't matter if you do a traditional, what some swim coaches will tell you, you need to get that elbow nice and high and dragging the fingers along the top of the water. Doesn't matter. Certainly if you do a more swimming triathlete, however your arm recovers, it doesn't matter. It could be straight, out to the side, really doesn't make a difference. If you get that rotation right, you're less likely, and like what I showed with Callum when he was kind of there rotating, if this arm is, or shoulders aren't rotating, sorry, hips aren't rotating, you're more likely to need to swing the arm round, which is going to cause it to carry over into a crossover. You're going to see that arm cross over a lot more. What happens after this? I'm going to have to straighten it up, which I'm probably going to do by doing this. And I'm then going to go off balance again. So I'm going to use this arm to sweep out to the side, put a lot of strain through here, and I'm then off balance again. So I'm just going to that perpetual loop again. Whereas if I've got that rotation from here, I've got control over where that hand goes in. Yeah. So it does make a big difference. And the crossover I was saying earlier, 9 times out of 10, if you cross over at the front of the stroke, you'll also scissor kick at the back end. It's the cause of your crossover. But your crossover is caused because you're probably not rotating. Yeah. Most people try and fix a crossover by getting you to enter further away. Fine, it might work, probably won't, because you're not fixing the rotation issue. So you'll end up, you'll come in here, but you'll still be swimming like this, and you're probably more likely to still see your legs going all over the place. So yeah, if you're going to have a crossover, fix it with rotation most likely. So that's a crossover. So yeah, so again, hips are really flat there. And it's going to be harder to get the back end of your stroke as well. And it's not always about having a longer stroke. Longer isn't always better, certainly for open water swimmers and triathletes. And if you're 5'4", you're probably not going to have a long stroke. So it's more about getting the chest, the back muscles moving, reducing the load through the shoulders than necessarily how long your stroke is going to be. So like distance per stroke is probably not one you need to worry about. Any questions on rotation? So, all came up at once. So things to help you improve, again, turning from the hip, keeping those abdominals engaged that we did in body resistance is going to help. So if we get that right, if we engage our abdominals, it's probably going to be easier to get rotation as well. You can learn the float, use the float to help you with that movement. So what I mean by that is just doing like one arm with a float. You can do it without the float, just keep your arm here and just work on that movement. So really easy drill to do. You can do this really slowly. Hold that float out in front, just taking that stroke. Do a couple sides on one, a couple sides on the other. And again, that comes back to the breathing. If breathing to one side is difficult, it's probably because rotation to one side is not as good. So you can use that drill, float out in front, or hand just out in front, to work on breathing to that other side that you're less comfortable with. It starts to get you used to a bit more rotation as well.
I find that as I'm pulling with the arm, I stretch out one arm full with the other, and that starts the rotation, and then it kind of spreads down towards the hip. And so I don't really start with a rotation from the hip. I'm not sure how you do that.
I mean, to be fair, most of the thing with rotation, it's about one arm going forward and the other arm going back, kind of what you're saying there. So it's effectively one arm extending and the other arm pushing past your hip. For some people, telling them just to get the hip moving works. Other people just say it's that. I personally prefer to think about extending with my left and pushing past my hip with my right. That brings me into rotation. No, you're right. There's a thinking about turning the. It's more about getting the movement off from the hip, whether we think about pushing and rotating at the same time. Pushing past the hip. So a lot of people finish their stroke here, rather than think about pushing past here. That last bit of the swim stroke is really important, and it's always neglected. That's when you start to shorten your stroke. You'll shorten it here, this gets faster, this gets faster. You never get that last bit of the stroke. And if you get that, Ben, I think Ben was saying there, is that bit's going to help you into rotation because it's pushing you into that position. And you're also going to accelerate yourself forward. That last bit of the stroke is like your leg when you run, and it pushes you forward into the next stride.
Now, if you're using your tricep,
exactly,
a new muscle.
And if you feel your tricep, if you don't feel your tricep when you swim, you're probably not using it to swim. Where you want to get to the point where you come out the swim, it's like, oh, my triceps done some work. Again, if you look at good swimmers, they have big biceps and arms. It's not because they lift loads of weight. It's usually because that's the muscles they're using to generate propulsion. yeah, start with some single arm drills. Again, focus on leading the rotation from the hip. So again, coming into that arm with the single arm extension drill is think about that hip turns as you come past here. So that rather than think about that movement where my upper back turns first, I'm thinking about my hip turns first. Yeah. So last but not least. If you've done the last few things and improved them in some way, you're probably, it's a random number, but 80% of the way to improving your swimming. Most people get focused on this first and don't get the other two right. If you get better breathing, better body position, and also get that rotation slightly better, you're probably seeing good improvements in your swimming. And you're then also in a better position to do the next bit, which is generate more propulsion. So the catch and pull. I would consider propulsion thinking of creating leverage. We're trying to create levers to propel ourselves forward. I try not to use the word catch and pull personally. I have a vendetta against it. Because I think when people think about catch and pull in the water, it's like they're pulling their arm through the water. We don't want to do that. We want to push ourselves through the water. We want to get our arm in the right position, and then we want to push ourselves against that. The less my hand moves, the more I'm going forwards. Where if I'm pulling my arm back, I'm probably leading with my elbow, and I'm doing this. And that's why my stroke rate has to go up, because I'm just pulling my arm faster. So we want to think about, stop trying to catch the water. So what I mean by catching or pressing forward is my hand goes in the water. Hopefully I've got good rotation to set the stroke up. I'm here. Now my goal is to anchor my hand in place and travel forward using my other hip. So I'm here, there, and then I get to here, whack. Whereas what most people do is they get to here and they do that, and then they do that. And they're going to go forward, and if you can turn your arms quick enough, you can go relatively quickly, but it's a cost. It's going to use more energy. Yeah. Not to say that your stroke needs to be longer, but the more you're pushing yourself through the water, the further you're going for less effort, and you're using more leverage. Stroke rate and stroke length. Could spend all day speaking about differences. What do we think is the optimal? Should we be trying to reduce the number of strokes per length?
Depends how you swim.
Depends how you swim, yeah. I say generally say no for most people. Although unless you've got where you're taking 150 strokes to swim 25 metres, then you probably should. But it depends on a number of factors. I think sometimes when you get someone to just like count how many strokes they're taking per length and reduce it, it will 9 times out of 10 make them slower. Now, if you're 6'6" and you've got Phelps's build, probably be great. You can do 4 strokes a length. Where if you're Halle Gebrselassie, you're probably going to need to take 24 strokes per length. Both of them are fine, and both of them can work. But it's finding a balance for you. So again, shorter arms, you're going to need to turn your arms over a little bit quicker. Longer levers, you're probably going to be able to slow your stroke rate down. The problem is with most swimming and elite swimmers that do the videos on Instagram, they're probably 6 foot plus. They probably come from a swim background. They're big, tall people, because it helps with swimming, being quite tall, certainly for pool swimming. They're going to look like they're hardly taking any strokes because they've got these really long arms and legs, or certainly arms and torso, that's generating them through the water. The next video you see is someone going twice as fast with their arms. They still could be a good swimmer and still improve. So it's not necessarily about slowing your stroke down, and it's not about taking less strokes. It's trying to find a balance on what works for you.
How do you find that? Because I've got a very slow stroke rate, which is good for long distance. It's quite efficient. It's not tiring. But if I was doing a 1500 metre swim, I would probably benefit from turning my arms over quicker. But I've sort of just gravitated to this. So whether I'm swimming 10k or 1k, I still go at the same.
Yeah. There's a bit about that actually I think I've got in a minute within that, which I think is there, which will come into. There's a fair point. Remind me and I'll definitely come into answering that. And I'll show you a video of someone that kind of has probably bucks that a little bit. With propulsion, this is something I was speaking to someone about earlier, it's about the ability to internally rotate your shoulder. I know I said earlier, keeping it simple. This is not simple. Is effectively to get our arm, and you'll see people speak about the catch position with the elbow being close to vertical. Now that is effectively our paddle that we're trying to use to push ourselves forward. For me to get into that position, my shoulder needs to move in a certain movement. It needs to rotate, it needs to turn inwards. Yeah. If my shoulder can't do that, I'm always going to be limited to getting. So if you're really immobile through your shoulder and tight through here, that position is probably impossible for you. And if you can't get that position here, you're going to reduce how much propulsion you can generate, which means you're going to have to see your stroke rate go up slightly for swimming at a certain speed. It's also one that if you can work on, and one of the things I think to work on, just general shoulder mobility, is just get that shoulder joint moving in its complete range. doing things like hanging on a bar and just let that shoulder, be careful with it as well, but where you just rotate around that movement. And if you're really tight through here, getting that free and open can potentially improve your swimming without necessarily doing any more swimming. So it's that ability to say that is quite a complex thing. It's not something you're going to think about when you swim, is rotating your shoulder. But again, the rotation is going to allow you to rotate that shoulder. If I stop rotating here, my shoulder's not going to rotate anymore. Or if I get that rotation and open that armpit up a bit, I'm potentially in a position where I'm going to generate power from a rotated shoulder. Sure.
What's DPS?
Distance per stroke.
Oh.
Yeah. But into that, something that's never really spoken about and just relatively new to me thinking about it in reality is when you swim and that extension and that rotation is trying to lift your scapula, which is effectively your shoulder blade, off your rib slightly. That's what allows that shoulder to move more freely. If you're really locked in here, it's really difficult to do that movement. Where if I lift my shoulder up, it's a lot easier to get that position in there. So a really easy drill you can do in the gym or even before you swim is just some shoulder lifts here. So just standing there, just lifting your shoulders. So if you're really tight in the shoulder, it'll click and pop and make loads of noise, something you probably want to free up. But just getting that movement better can really open up the shoulders and really help improve swimming. It sets your high elbow position. Not always perfect, doesn't have to be perfect, but it does help get a little bit more power in the stroke and use the chest. Again, as I said there, if that's limited, you're going to need to increase your stroke rate. So if you do find you're not going to get it, doesn't matter how much you go to the gym and work on mobility and do yoga and whatnot, you might need to swim with a slightly higher tempo because of the lack of the mobility in the shoulder. I'll show you what that looks like. So what often happens is when we swim, because we're not rotating, is we end up in what's often called a dropped elbow position. Now sometimes that's caused because your hand's too high. So you end up being here, so this hand being here, and my elbow is now lower than my hand position. Ideally, I always want my elbow to be above my hand, so that I can roll into that position. Sometimes it comes when people extend, and they end up here. We want to get them a little bit deeper here, so that hand's there. But what tends to happen with people, they come into here, drop that elbow, and then they pull that elbow up. I'm not generating any propulsion. Now if I can do it fast enough, I'm going to go forward, whereas I want that hand to come in here, again, rotate, and now I'm in a position to generate a bit more propulsion. Even if I don't quite get it pushing forward, even though there's still a pullback, I'm going to see more propulsion from it. Whereas if I get to here, yeah, I'm just slipping through the water. And then you're going to be turning your arms over really quickly and going nowhere. And it's why often as you start swimming faster, there's a point where the effort goes up and the speed goes down. We want to try and find that kind of sweet spot where we're doing a good amount of effort, but we're swimming at the fastest pace that's kind of maintainable, rather than just going flat out for 50 and arms are going. So you end up in a position that looks like this, and I haven't gone too deep into the stroke timing, but you can see here how this position's here, so this arm's come in, this one's back here. This arm's already trying to do some propulsion here, but then this arm's going to come in, and the timing's now out, so this arm's got nowhere to go now, it's going to probably press down, and then they're going to just do the same thing again. They're just constantly turning their arms over, where I'd like to see this swimmer have their elbow a little bit further forward. And this is where we get overcomplicated. What causes this here is not that you slow that arm down. You're not pausing that arm there. It's the increase in resistance that you feel from that front part. So you start to get a hold of more water. That's that feeling of on your forearm. The more water you get here, that naturally slows that position down until this arm comes in. And there is it's a bit like running. Your foot lands on the ground. There's a deacceleration phase. Happens relatively quickly. You deaccelerate before you get into the propulsive phase. Yeah. Now it's milliseconds in reality, and swimming's the same. Where if you're here and you're pausing, you're slowing down. You're then got to start from zero again. It's a bit like running and going up and down. I want to hit the ground, slow down really quickly, and accelerate really quickly. Same with swimming. I want to be here and been able to get that propulsion happen as this hand comes in. So I'm here. That's me now, slow as I'm going to be in my stroke, and I propel myself forward through my hips. Does that make sense? I think we've lost to keep it simple, but whatever. But fundamentally, you're trying not to let your arms slip through the water. Again, you start to see here, there's a swimmer who's a relatively good swimmer, totally off balance here, causing their legs to sink. They're going to need to turn those arms over quicker to stop them from sinking further. And if you get them to slow down, they'll probably get worse. Whereas if you can slow them down in terms of getting a hold of more water, they're going to feel improvements with their swimming. Now, if you can get it something like that, you're doing all right. So thinking again, just saying there, like sometimes thinking about this makes a big difference. Thinking that you want to push yourself forward, not pull your arm backwards. So I think when you get to that position at the front of the stroke, I'm trying to press against the water. rather than just pull the arm backwards through the water. That sometimes makes a big difference with what we do. And I always think about personally, something I came across recently in my head was that hand goes into a glove that's now stuck in concrete. That hand doesn't go anywhere. I then travel over that hand and then I push against that to get my hand back out the glove. So here, there again, the anchor point, then pushing forward. Yeah? And I think I've seen with some good swimmers where it's not something I would teach anybody to try and do. I don't know how they do it. Some good swimmers, they almost scull. They come into the water and there's like a slight, and it's almost like they're trying to find where the anchor point is. And once they get it, that's when they generate propulsion. They probably don't know they do it. It's just they're trying to find where, right, that's the sweet spot, and then they're pushing against that. Or most of us don't know that, are just hoping we get something and move forward.
That's what the motion we refer to as front quadrant swimming.
Yeah, the last bit's front quadrant swimming, yeah. So things will help you improve in terms of propulsion. I don't know how I've managed to go over time again. Work on shoulder mobility can definitely help that. Exercise that's going to help open up that shoulders, open up that chest. Bands are really good for that. Again, getting that shoulder move in its full range is really important. Most of us don't ever work our shoulder in certain movements. We're really good, do lat pull downs, things like that, which rotates our shoulders externally. We don't do anything that helps move that shoulder freely into internal rotation. Yeah. So anything that's going to help, let's say one of the best things you can do is just grab a dumbbell and just circle that arm round in different movements around. Getting that quite a light dumbbell, nothing too heavy, is a really easy way to rotate that shoulder under a little bit of load. But yeah, anything's going to open your chest is going to help, which is what I just said. Something I didn't speak about there, experiment with the depth of your hand. So I always get swimmers to experiment a little bit with this, is when that hand comes in, a lot of people tend to go slightly too high in my opinion. They end up here, which starts to cause that position to break, and they end up, for the first part of their stroke, they're pressing down until they can get into a position where their shoulder can move. So I think in a lot of cases you're better to go slightly deeper, get that position sooner, and you then move forward first, rather than where you end up here, down, slip, I've lost all of it. Where if I come in a little bit deeper, I potentially get that arm starting there. And it comes into, again, how flexible your shoulders are. More flexible shoulders, the kind of less you need to go deep. Which is slightly deeper works for limit shoulder mobility. Again, it lets you start the stroke there. Trying to feel the water. Fundamentally, one of the things you're looking for is more resistance. You want to feel like the water gets thicker. Okay, it's just like, oh, hold on a second. It's like going into the big gear on a bike. Like you go down a hill, hit a hill again, when you automatically feel that change in resistance. That's what we're trying to feel when we swim. As I can't tell you how to feel that. A bit of experimentation, obviously, in the water. But what you're looking for when you get into the front part of that stroke, you're looking to try and feel like, hold on, there is something here, it's solid. Then the goal is to learn to not let that elbow collapse and make it easier for yourself. You want to feel that there's some resistance. People tend to feel it more if you use paddles, because it creates that bigger surface area. But then again, sometimes with paddles, you get to here, yeah, you're getting more propulsion, but you're still just dragging the arm through and you're still using the shoulder rather than the chest. But more resistance, the better. Then the goal is to hold more resistance for longer over time. So, I've only got a couple of slides left here. So, swim training. So the thing for me, all those million technical things I've given you to try and remember, the key is developing the ability to maintain technique when fatigued. So, again, can you focus on something while you're starting to get tired, rather than default back to how you normally swim? That's really difficult to do, but that's what's going to make the difference. So I would say prioritize your technique in all phases of swimming. So regardless of whether, in cycling you would do some easy miles, whatever, technique should be mainly there, because you're going to improve more from improving technique than you will on improving your fitness. And again, don't be worried about going slower initially. Certainly if it's early winter and you're not going to race until middle of next year, you can afford to go a little bit slower. Because you find with swimming is once you've learned mechanics of swimming, it's very easy to go back to that. That's why people, once they learn to swim as a kid, they pick it up pretty quickly again. Even if they're terrible in fitness-wise, they'll get back to a pretty good level relatively quickly. So again, spend time experimenting with different techniques, finding what works. Worst case scenario, you do go a little bit slower, you'll probably divert back to what you did fairly quickly if you need to. But hopefully in the meantime you're getting faster. I always advocate for doing short intervals with high frequency. Most people get in and swim 2k non-stop, 3k non-stop, whatever they're doing. After 100 meters, you forget about what you're doing. You're just swimming. How many meters is that? 150, 200 meters. Now, not to say you can't swim longer stuff, but put something there that forces you to reset and think about something in your stroke, rather than just go in and swim lengths. Okay, that's like what we do for cycling and running. You get away with it cycling and running because it is fitness limited. As soon as you forget about what you're trying to do, trying to change where your hand goes in, rotation, keep your core engaged, you will just default back to what you do. Again, it comes back. You swam 2k, how much of it was good? Did you think about technique? If not, you're probably just swimming how you normally swim. You're not going to see improvements from that. Yeah, so doing some short reps. So if you want to swim 2K, do 40-50s. Focus on good technique, short recovery, 5-10 seconds. It's not a recovery, it's a reset. It's like get to the end, right, I need to keep my core engaged. Right, start off, next length, push off the wall, get that core engaged. Right, another 50 meters. I do that 3-4 times a week. I'm probably going to make more improvements than doing 2 or 3 swims non-stop. 3K swims non-stop. So short reps, high frequency. You know, no reason why. Like, people think because it's short, it's not going to improve your fitness, endurance. It'll improve your endurance, and more importantly, it'll improve your fitness. If you need to go longer, 50-50s, 60-50s, do 150s if you want to do 5K. It does get a bit tedious, but it allows you to keep focused on technique. But find the intensity you can swim the fastest without losing that technique. So it's fine, there is, say, that sweet spot where you start to go a little bit faster and you start to use more energy, but you're not actually going any faster. You start to just slip through the water more. You want to try and sit on that side where, right, I'm starting to feel where there's a good amount of water and I'm swimming well. Reset, go again, build that up over time, rather than go so fast that technique's kind of gone, you're just slipping through the water and you're using so much fitness to do so. And then practice it. Stop micro-comparing swim intervals. Swimming is a unique sport that you can measure a 25-metre interval. You don't do that in running. You don't go every 30 seconds and check where your pace is relative to what your distance that you want to run a 10K at next year. Swimming's really bad for that. You go in and everyone goes, right, swim 100 metres, 140, whatever. Oh, that's slower than I want to swim Ironman at. God, I need to go faster. And then they're not thinking about technique anymore. They're just trying to swim intervals and not necessarily do it. So some will be faster, some will be slower. The key for us as swimmers is to learn what is it that allows that intervals to be faster and what are causing some of the ones to be slower. That only comes by being a bit more intentional and deliberate with what we're doing. But you'll end up frustrated if you're just measuring every 25-50 metres. Swimming without a watch is quite a good thing to do. Really difficult to do with triathletes because so much data and so much metrics in there. But here's some example sessions I use fairly regularly. Steal them, do what you want with them. Again, just what I've said there. 48 to 60 25s, something I did a lot last year. 60 25s, started with 3 easy, 1 fast. Just a nice change. That fast one, it's not sprint, it's not how fast I can do 25 at, it's just a little bit of a change in effort. Because you might find that slight little bit increase in pace feels better, and then I go back to maybe slightly easier. And you can build that up to whatever you want. Again, I changed that over the season to be like gradually got to doing 3 fast, 1 easy. And then it became a slightly harder session where it's like you're only getting 20-25 seconds recovery in that easy interval, and then you're back into another fast. That accumulates really, really quickly. When you get up to doing 60 then, you know about it by the time you get to the last set. 40 to 50, 40, 20, so again 40 times 50, steady effort, 10 seconds rest, a pretty standard set I use. Really easy way to focus on technique and build some aerobic endurance. You can do 15, 20, 100s, a fairly standard session for most people. You can change where the 25 metre is, so you do 75 metres easy, 25 metre fast, 50 easy, 25 fast, 25 easy. If you're here Monday, same session I gave, doesn't change. Again, you can always change the start time, so you maybe give yourself longer recovery at the start, less recovery at the end, or vice versa. Play with that from that. Advocate for pull buoy and paddles. Sometimes you've got to be careful with pull buoy, it can limit rotation. So you tend to see some people use pull buoy because it like anchors their legs. I find personally that's what happens to me is I stop rotating and put a lot more load on my shoulder. So I'll tend to just do paddles only rather than paddle pull buoys. But if pull buoy is going to help keep your legs higher, paddle pull buoy is a really good way to improve your swimming quickly. And potentially think about technique. And you get a little bit of faster speed as well. But when you start to lose form, reduce the session or finish early. And the actual session is less important in reality. It's more about what you're doing in that session. So yeah, whether you do 2100s or 4050s doesn't make much difference in most cases, but whatever allows you to maintain good strokes for longer is going to make the big difference. And that's the best one. And then pretty much here. So general conclusion, be curious and experiment with what might work for you. Don't be too stuck in the way. I've done that in the past where I'm like, no, this is how you have to swim. Experiment with it, try things. Ask people's opinions, get them to try. Ask good swimmers. If there's a good swimmer in your lane, ask them questions. So what do you do when your hand goes in front of the stroke? They might describe it in a way that, oh my god, I never thought about that before. That might change how you think about it, give you something else to work on. But identify what your limiters are. Is it, what part of your technique? Is it your breathing, body position, rotation? From that. Oh, don't know why that went that way. Yeah, so there, forget about looking in a particular way, so in terms of how good the stroke looks or bad the stroke looks. Obviously, once you know your limiters, work on improving your limiters, but prioritize breathing and drag reduction. get those legs higher, get your breathing relaxed. If you do that, you're going to make progress. So the pool boy's there to help you. But learn to relax and enjoy swimming. Although we've said a lot of technical things, sometimes we overthink it. We're thinking about too many different things at once. Bring it back to one or two key things. Simplistic is better, despite what I've just said for the last 45 minutes or so. But keep it simple and enjoy it. If you enjoy it, you're going to do more of it. But this comes back to what I said right at the start. Figure out what you think you need to do. Make a bit of a plan how you think you're going to improve it, and stick to it within reason. Okay, don't wait for the next article to tell you that this is better or that's the worst thing you can do, and you go around the houses starting another one. Make a plan. Set a period on when you think, right, I'm going to change it if it doesn't work. Maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Sometimes it might take longer, but if you give that, at least you're going to have a bit of time to practice on making some changes. But record what works and what doesn't. That's something nobody ever does. You don't make a note of, right, yeah, that felt better, that didn't feel better. Oh, I felt something different today. Well, what was it? By next week you've forgotten about it again, and you come back and you're almost starting afresh every week. So make a note of, right, yeah, that works for me, that doesn't work for me. And then in a few years' time, you'll have a list of things that you know works and a list of things that you know don't work. Even if they don't work for you, doesn't mean they don't work. Again, keep it simple. And I've said that before, but there's no magic training session. So people always want to know what's the best session to do if you're doing an Ironman or sprint. There is not one. Again, the best session is what's going to help you improve by focusing on technique. But being consistent is always key. The more consistent you are with swimming, the better you're going to see improvements. Getting to the pool consistently over time is probably going to be wasted. I would say to most people, 2 to 3 swims a week is really where you start to see improvements. Once a week is probably what. Now, if you've done a lot of swimming, you can probably get by on once a week, but you will go backwards. I know that from my own example. If I'm swimming 3-4 times a week, I start to feel really good after 2 weeks. If I go back to once a week, notice it within 2 weeks that I'm starting to regress. It's just the water feels different. And again, that's that feeling-based thing. And just one thing there, one word to explain what you might do differently after tonight. Hopefully something. Never come back to another talk again because I've overran twice in a row. And there's some just general talks as well for anybody who's, I think most of them are still free, I think, from that. And if anybody's got any questions from that, happy to answer them.